According to different modes of material nature, the mode of goodness, the mode of passion, and the mode of darkness, there are different living creatures who are known as demigods, human beings, and hellish living entities. O king, even a particular mode of nature, being mixed with the other two, is divided into three, and thus each kind of living creature is influenced by the other modes and acquires its habits also. The living entities, individually, are being conducted by a particular mode of nature, but at the same time, there is every chance that they are being influenced by the other two. Generally, all conditioned souls in the material engagement are influenced by the mode of passion, because every one of them is trying to lord it over the material nature to fulfill his individual desire. But in spite of the individual mode of passion, there is always the chance of being influenced by the other modes of nature by association. If one is in good association, he can develop the mode of goodness, and if in bad association, he may develop the mode of darkness or ignorance. Nothing is stereotyped. One can change his habit by good or bad association, and one has to become intelligent enough to discriminate between good and bad. The best association is the service of the devotees of the Lord, and by that association, one can become the highest qualified man by the grace of the Lord's pure devotees. As we have already seen in the life of Srila Narada Muni, he became the topmost devotee of the Lord simply by the association of pure devotees of the Lord. By birth, he was the son of a maidservant and had no knowledge of his father and no academic education, even of the lowest status. But simply by associating with the devotees and by eating the remnants of their foodstuffs, he gradually developed the transcendental qualities of the devotees. By such association, his taste for chanting and hearing the transcendental glories of the Lord became prominent, and because the glories of the Lord are non-different from the Lord, he got direct association with the Lord by means of sound representation. Similarly, there is the life of Ajamil, 6th canto, who was the son of a Brahmana and was educated and trained properly in the discharge of the duties of a Brahmana, but who, in spite of all this, because he contacted the bad association of a prostitute, was put into the path of the lowest quality of Chandala, or the last position for a human being. Therefore, the Bhagavatam always recommends the association of the Mahat, or the great soul, for opening the gate of salvation. To associate with persons engaged in lording it over the material world means to enter into the darkest region of hell. One should try to raise himself by the association of the great soul. That is the way of the perfection of life. Okay? Sarvam rajastama iti tisrasura vinaraka titrapi ekaikasho raja vijante gatayastrida yadaekaikatarunyabhyam sabhava upahaniti. According to the different modes of material nature, the mode of goodness, the mode of passion, and the mode of darkness, there are different living creatures who are known as demigods, human beings and hellish living entities. O king, even a particular mode of nature, being mixed with the other two, is divided into three, and thus each kind of living entity, living creature, is influenced by the other modes and acquires its habits also. So here we find that Shukadeva Goswami, who is the speaker of the Srimad Bhagavatam, he is describing how the different modes of material nature affect the different living entities and cause them to accept bodies of different varieties. This universe is divided minimally into three planetary systems, or three sections, the upper, middle, and lower system, or sections. It is further subdivided into 14 planetary systems. when they're more specifically named. But this upper, middle, and lower, this is the basic subdivision in the universe. Now, one may attain a higher body than human being. The human body is not the highest, although sometimes people think so. People think this is very high body, because everything is relative. When there's no other higher living entities around, the human beings, they seem to be very high. But actually, they're not high at all. Actually, the human beings are terribly low class in this universe. When you compare the human being to the demigods, the human being is just like some ant walking on the earth planet, both in size and in stature, intelligence, and especially duration of life. We're no different than some little ants. As we see little ants, similarly the demigods see us. It's all relative. Prabhupada used to use this saying, Bengali saying, in a field of no trees, the castor tree looks very big. Now, castor oil plant, the castor bean plant is this big. So, in a field where there's no trees, such a tree looks like a big tree. There's nothing to compare it to. So, similarly, in this earth planet where there is no higher class living entity, we human beings seem to be big stuff. But actually, we are very small. Now, for those who live in the heavenly planets, their bodies are made much more of the mode of goodness. They are not so much made of gross matter. This particular mixture of matter is very troublesome because, first of all, it cuts very easily. With a knife, you can slice it very quickly. All this red stuff comes out. If you fall, you break things very quickly. One is very much tortured by hunger and thirst. And old age is very much driving us. Disease is giving us troubles. So these bodies are not very handy for enjoying in the material world. Now, in the higher planetary systems, the bodies are much better than these bodies. They are made in such a way that they don't get harmed so simply. It is much more difficult to harm the body of a demigod, for instance. One has to be extremely powerful to do such a thing. Ordinarily, the painful conditions in the heavenly planets are much, much less. In fact, on the bodily platform, very rarely does one ever experience painful conditions. But he may experience pain in the mind, because that is also extreme painful condition. And the mind gives you much trouble. So that makes trouble up here, pain. So even though you may physically have no trouble, mentally there'll be some trouble. Because everywhere in the material world, Abraham, Bhuvanalo, Punar, Vichanarjuna, are places where there are troubles. Because this is the material world. You will not find an atmosphere free from anxiety or free from disturbance or difficulty. There'll always be some trouble. But those who are in the heavenly planets are there because they have developed the mode of goodness. That is not to say that they are purely in the mode of goodness, with no other influence. No. But they are predominantly in the mode of goodness. Mainly in the mode of goodness. They are also in the modes of passion to a certain degree. In other words, predominating mode is goodness, and to some degree there's some passion, to some degree there's some ignorance, much less. Therefore, those who are in the heavenly planets are very nicely maintained for some period of time. long period, because of taking shelter in the mode of goodness. Those who are on the earth planet, us, are predominantly in the mode of passion. This means that mainly we are extremely passionate. Mainly we are interested in gaining all kinds of results of our activities. Mainly we are interested in our sense gratification, and not much more than that. Mainly. But there's a little goodness thrown in. Sometimes here on this planet, people like to live in the country. They like to be good. They like to help others. They like to learn some knowledge, be peaceful. So some goodness is there. But still they think of themselves as the controllers of this material world. Even in the heavenly planets, they think of themselves as controllers or enjoyers. So there's a good deal of passion there too. But there's also a lot of goodness, therefore they stay up there. And in our case, it's mainly passion, with some goodness, just enough to maintain, and enough ignorance, quite sufficient, for keeping one wrapped up in the material world. People are very much in ignorance. That is why they will engage themselves especially in this intoxication business. This is the best way to stay in the mode of ignorance. To take a lot of intoxication and then to sleep. This is the perfect way to stay in complete ignorance in this material world, and thus in complete mind. Of course, those in the mode of passion are also totally in mind. Those in the mode of goodness are also in mind. But there, from that platform of goodness, one can gradually elevate himself to a superior place. Sada rajastamo bhava kama lobadayas chaye chaita eta anabritam stitim sattve prasidati. That when one, by development, gradual development of devotional service, gradually elevates himself out of the modes of ignorance and passion, and gradually situates himself in the mode of goodness, then at that point, stitim sattve prasidati, when he's situated in that mode of nature, evam prasanna manaso, the mind becomes very much more pacified, peaceful, satisfied. It likes the situation that it is in, this situation of peacefulness, because it is a springing board. It's like you have this diving board. So the mode of goodness is like a springboard to the higher realms of transcendental consciousness. In other words, from the mode of goodness, you can realize everything in the transcendental sense. From the mode of passion, you can't realize anything. What you can realize? Material sense gratification, fruit of result. From the mode of ignorance, you can't even realize that. Mode of ignorance is just pure animal existence. The animals are completely in the mode of ignorance. Also, the rakshasas, these rakshasas, you know what a rakshasa is? Well, rakshasas, first of all, they're big, ugly fellows. Girls can also be rakshasas. You know rakshasas. And they have mystic power to a certain extent. They can change their bodily forms at will. Sometimes, for instance, the female rakshasas, although by nature they're ugly, but they transform themselves into very beautiful women by our standards. Of course, by Rakshasa standards, they're very beautiful. As far as we are concerned, horrible. Just makes you shake just to see. Rakshasi. But then they transform themselves into beautiful girls by our standards. And they come and they capture some male man. Then they enjoy with them, and then they eat them. This is actually the business of Rakshasas. And the Rakshasas men, they do the same thing for the women. They live on human flesh. They like that very much. If they cannot get any human flesh, then they'll eat animals. But they used to live in the forest. These Rakshasas were popularly living in the forest. And Lord Ramachandra, he battled a whole race of Rakshasas. Practically killed them all. Nowadays you don't find Rakshasas in the forest because they've all been killed by pious kings and incarnations of the Lord. The Rakshasa race no longer appears there. But of course nowadays these Rakshasas, you cannot kill the soul. So the Rakshasa has to go somewhere. So they take birth as human beings nowadays. And although they look like normal people, as soon as you are a devotee, you come around, then immediately their original Rakshasa nature comes out and they want to eat you. And if they can't eat you, they would at least like to chop you into pieces. And that way they'll be very happy. So the Rakshasas are the product of the mode of ignorance. They're filled with lust, hatred, anger, and above all, they're just completely, totally ignorant of their position. Tamagun. The Tamagun, this mode of ignorance, this is ruled by Lord Shiva. And he's very merciful to these personalities. He gives them some shelter, he tries to give them some direction to whatever extent they could accept it. And if they accept Lord Shiva, that's very good for them. Because then they are getting some small amount of agyata sukriti, some pious activity that they're not even aware of. Because Lord Shiva is a Mahajan. He's actually a very great personality. So therefore they are getting some advancement. But Lord Shiva is in charge of all those creatures of the mode of ignorance. They're called bhutas, pretas, pishachas, ghosts, spirits, jinns, all these. You have this Yuvasati thing. Yeah. You've seen jinns. So, in Mayapur sometimes they come through. So, we find that Lord Shiva is very, very merciful to all of these creatures in the mode of ignorance who you don't even want to speak about. And in the mode of passion, we find the Asura. Sura, Asura. The Sura means the demigods. Asura means the demons. Now they come from the same family. Kashyapa Muni, he had two wives, amongst others, Diti and Aditi. All the offspring of Diti, they were the demons. All the offspring of Aditi, they were the demigods. So, you have the two lines like this, coming from the same father. They all have the same father, so they're all brothers. But they're stepbrothers. But in the demoniac families, in the devotee families, they just fight all the time. Whatever a demon says, the demigod has to say, says the opposite. Whatever the demigod says, the demon says the opposite. If the demigods would say white, the demon would say black. The demigods would say black, the demons would say white. They simply cannot relate in any way. There's no relationship. They're always fighting against each other. Historically, throughout the whole history of the universe, there have been battles going on. Since the birth of the demons and the demigods, there have been battles going on between these two races. But the demigods usually win because they work in the mode of goodness, and the demons, they work in the mode of passion. In the mode of passion, you can create something, build something up very nicely. but it always crumbles down again because one in the mode of passion doesn't know how to maintain anything. That person in the mode of passion can't maintain anything. Whereas the demigods, who are expert maintainers, that's their job. In this material world, the job of the demigods is to very nicely maintain the whole universe. Now, of course, here on the earthly planet, we may complain a little bit about the job the demigods are doing, especially those in charge of weather and things like that. But it is not their fault. There's no problem for King Indra to get rid of the clouds and make it nice all the time. Make it rain only at night when you're inside sleeping, and then have it, by the time you wake up, it's all nice again. You can do that very easily. But this is only done when there is a pious ruler, pious king, like Maharaj Yudhisthira. When Maharaj Yudhisthira was king, every day was an instinct. It was never too hot, and it was never too cold. It would only rain at night when everyone was sleeping. By the time you wake up, it was already finished. Everything was very properly arranged. But that was because the people were pious. The people in the state. They were going to the temple, they were praying to Krishna, they were offering Krishna their food, they were chanting his holy name, to whatever degree they could, according to their social status. Some were better than others. But the society in general was not made of demons. No slaughtering of animals, no illicit sex, no intoxication, no gambling. These things were unheard of in the kingdom of Maharaj Yudhisthira. These things were also unheard of in the kingdom of Maharaj Parikshit. But when Maharaj Parikshit was in his kingdom, Kali tried to enter in. The age of Kali began, and tried to enter into the kingdom and introduce quarreling amongst the people, sinful activity. And therefore Maharaj Parikshit stopped him with his sword, very strong and powerful. So, when the ruler is pious, not only pious, but strong and powerful to keep everything according to these spiritual principles, then the demigods are very pleased with such person. Why? Because one of the symptoms of the piety is that all kinds of sacrifices are offered. All different forms of sacrifices are offered to the demigods, and the demigods, being very pleased with the performers of sacrifice, grant them all kinds of blessings, benedictions, good weathers, opulent condition. You know, it's just a question of the time. In the Satya Yuga, when all of the people were predominantly in the mode of goodness, and they were all of a very high class. They were all high-class people. They didn't even have to farm by plowing the soil. The plants would grow just if you sowed the seeds, the plants would grow. You didn't have to plow. And when the plants were there, they would just drop more seeds and more plants would grow. Just the same way that today weeds grow. Then the vegetables and the grains grew. There were no weeds. If you wanted weeds, you had to plant them. And nobody wanted weeds, so therefore there were no weeds. But later on, because the people's, in general, the total society was diminishing in its piety, so plowing started, varnashram dharma started, all these things to regulate human life. Yes. To regulate human life, all of these things began. So we find that even in the universe there are creatures in the mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Similarly, in the ages, from Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwarfa Yuga, Kali Yuga, the living entity's condition is different according to the modes of nature. Now, as the Kali Yuga progresses, people are almost totally in the mode of passion, and the mixture now is completely absorbed in ignorance. You have passion and ignorance very, very high in this mixture. And goodness is just like a trace element. Practically, sometimes you hardly find goodness at all. So, as the Kali Yuga will progress, even the mode of passion will diminish. And it'll become pure ignorance. Just as in the beginning of the Satya Yuga, there was so much nice goodness, in the end of the Kali Yuga, it's absolutely pure ignorance. You'll find no goodness anywhere. You'll find people harassed in all ways by rogues and thieves. And the government will be just as bad. They will steal everything from the people and give them nothing. There will be scarcity of rain, and if it does rain, it'll make a flood and everybody will be dead. Famine, the people will be very small. If you grow to be this big, you'll be a real tall man. Maximum duration of life will be 40 years. If you're a 40-year-old, you will be considered like the oldest of old people. Just like today we have 110-year-old people. So, if you have a 40-year-old man, they'll be considered to be ancient. Ancient. And generally, 20 years will be old man. And the trees will shrink in size. We find historical references in the Srimad Bhagavatam as well when King Muchakunda, he was sleeping in a cave because he had been fighting with the demigods. Not fighting against the demigods, but with them on the same side, against the demons. And he was a little tired from all that fighting, so he got a benediction from the demigods that he would sleep uninterruptedly for a long time. And if somebody woke him up prematurely, he would be able to burn them to ashes with his lance. So, King Muchakunda, after he was woken up by Krishna's arrangement, he, after burning to ashes this Kaliyamana demon, he noticed that in the area outside, the trees were very small because he had been sleeping for a whole yuga. And during that time, all the trees became very small. For him, because he was so big, he was looking down on the trees. And he was wondering, how come the trees got so small? All the people were so small. Everything was so little. Because as time goes on, things shrink. And as they get smaller, there's more and more population too. Because in the Satya Yuga, there's not very much population. Because there are very few living entities qualified to take birth as people in the Satya Yuga. Very few living entities. Mainly all of the living entities are qualified to be plants, animals. Hardly any were qualified to be humans. Therefore, in Satya Yuga, the world was very sparsely populated. But it was not that the people who were populating it were cavemen. Not at all. They were the most sophisticated people with extreme power in all respects. And their physical bodies were enormous. You can't even imagine how big they were compared to us. The earth is a big place. It can handle big people and big trees. It's not a problem. The earth is also the shelter for big, big mountains. And we don't run out of space. So if there are less people and they're very big, and the trees are very big, that's all right. It all fits. But as the ages progress, and especially as we get to Kali Yuga, the qualification to be a human being in the Kali Yuga is so much reduced that anybody can become a human being. And therefore, the world becomes populated with human beings in the same way that the world is now populated with ants. You find everywhere human beings running all over the place, building houses, driving here and there, everywhere popping up human beings, like ant colonies, piles of ants everywhere, you've got piles of people everywhere. And as the Kali Yuga progresses, it will get more and more and more. There's people everywhere, just all in a mode of ignorance, doing horrible nonsense things. No fun in this Kali Yuga. It's not a very nice situation. Are you listening to your phone? Because I'm noticing the whole class. This poor girl here is holding this thing up and suffering my hand. Why don't you just come over here where the other girls are who listen in English? Yes, switch places. I hate to see all that suffering. So, the Kali Yuga is just, of course, we don't even have to describe the Kali Yuga. We live in it, we know it. We don't have to study about the Kali Yuga. We know perfectly well what is this Kali Yuga. It is simply a time of intense trouble. And we can see this. There's no peace anywhere. You look in the world, there's so much agitation everywhere. One of the symptoms of the Kali Yuga is that nobody's satisfied with anything. Therefore, they always make agitation. They don't want to leave things alone, make a peaceful circumstance. They all become lusty and then start to make trouble for other people. Agitation, trouble, anxiety. Therefore, everybody's marching in the street, political this, political that. Then if they don't like what's going on, they blow up a building here, or they blow up an airplane, or they shoot somebody, or the whole world's going crazy. And this you may have noticed. And it's not getting better. It's getting worse. So, this is Kali Yuga. It will just continually degrade more and more and more. Because the modes of nature, they are always changing. Just like, for instance, if you have something which is predominantly in the mode of passion, you can only have one mode of nature which is predominant at a time. You can't have both passion and ignorance predominant. You will have passion predominating, and then you'll have ignorance a lot, and then maybe goodness a little. It's just like, let's say you have 100% of something. So if you have three things, one thing may be 80%, one thing may be 18%, one thing may be 2%. So maybe in the Kali Yuga right now, you find people who are 70% in the mode of passion, 28% in the mode of ignorance, and 2% in the mode of goodness. So you all... Now, sometimes in the world, in the atmosphere of the world, you find that the modes of nature are also acting on all the people, even though each individual person has his own particular mode of nature. The atmosphere of the world also affects these persons by the overall effect of the material nature. And you'll find sometimes things are quite nice, and everybody's a little peaceful. There's no big wars. They'd already finished killing each other. They quit. And things settle down for a little while. Then, mysteriously, by the nature of time, it starts to happen that agitation takes place, troubles take place, people fight people, everybody's angry at each other, nobody's peaceful anymore, economies start crashing. This is the mode of nature. Sometimes passion is very high, sometimes ignorance is very high, sometimes goodness is very high. But they're always going up and down like this. One gets higher. Let's say, for instance, if the goodness gets higher, in other words, the goodness starts to predominate, then the demigods are affluent. They're doing very nicely. The demigods thrive in the mode of goodness. But if the mode of passion starts to predominate, then the demons start to thrive, because that's their mode of nature. Just like if it's raining all the time, then the worms or the creatures who swim in the water or they start to predominate, because the other creatures, they don't like it. But when it becomes very hot, there's no rain whatsoever, well, then the insects like that a lot, and the what do you call these lizards and other creatures who like heat like that, they predominate. Or when it becomes very, very cold, then only like the polar bears, penguins, creatures like this, they predominate. So we can understand, just according to different conditions, some creatures thrive in some conditions, and other creatures thrive in other conditions. And when the conditions change, those who the conditions are not very good for, they diminish. So nowadays, that we are in this mode of passion and ignorance, sometimes more passion, sometimes more ignorance. So the Rakshasas thrive in ignorance, the demons thrive in passion. And where are the demigods? You don't find the demigods anymore. They don't even come to this planet. They've given up on the earth planet. It's so demonic, earth planet. Earth planet is so completely demonic, so completely ignorant. The demigods, they don't come. They're not interested. They will only come here when this place has many sacrifices. When the people perform sacrifice. When they make fire yajna, pouring the ghee, throwing the grains, speaking the mantras according to the Vedic prescriptions. Or if they are chanting the holy name of the Lord, Sankirtan, then the demigods become inspired to come to the earth planet. But otherwise, they never come. They have not come for a long time to the earth planet, and we don't expect them soon. But if we can encourage all the people in the world to engage in this Sankirtan mission, chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, then there is great possibility that the demigods will again come here. And that's very good, because when they come, they offer benediction. And that people like that. Because we need it. We're in bad shape in this particular world. Therefore, benedictions are very much required. So, the demigods, they will come and help us in that way by offering benedictions like this. But that is the way in which the world's supposed to go on. The people, they offer the sacrifices, and the demigods, they offer the benedictions. The two nourish each other. By the people offering these sacrifices, the demigods become prominent. They become very, satisfied. And when the demigods are satisfied, they mutually nourish all of the people, who also become satisfied. And in this way, the two together, they work like a team. People offering sacrifices, the demigods offering benedictions. that all desirable things in life are attained. But this is only possible for those who are in the mode of goodness. But that doesn't work like that. Even Prahlad Maharaj's friend said, when we're old, Prahlad, then we'll surrender to Krishna. Not now, we're young. Now it's time to enjoy. Now it's time to be very happy in childhood affairs, just singing, jumping, dancing, playing. No time to surrender. But Prahlad said, no. Now's the time. Because later on, you'll become attached, especially since you're the sons of demons. You'll become attached to your demoniac activities, and you won't surrender to Krishna later, especially when you get older. It's very hard to surrender to Krishna. For an old person to surrender is very, very difficult, because he's so fixed in his ways, he doesn't want to surrender. So this is a difficult thing to do, to surrender. So we are requesting everybody to give it a good try, to just keep on going in this devotional service and make it a grand success. Otherwise, it will be very, very difficult if you have to take next lifetime too. Maybe or maybe not, one gets the chance to very quickly become Krishna conscious. Maybe next lifetime means next lifetime means next lifetime. Who knows how many lifetimes you can push it off. Make an end to this business now. Finish it off. Go back home, back to God. No more lifetimes. No more births and deaths. Now, let's go right back to the Supreme Lord's abode and render service to Him in pure love. Any questions? Yes?
Connection. How is it that Bali Maharaj was a separate soul?
Because it's the nature of demons to fight demigods. That is their nature. It's their family business. This fighting of demigods and demons is a material affair. It's in the material world. It's like occupational duty. Business. What's the matter? Okay, come back in. It's like occupational duty, like business. Demons and demigods fighting. So, Bali Maharaj was just doing his family business. But within, he was a great devotee of the Lord, much greater than Indra. So, as far as he was concerned, if he took over the universe, that would be good for the universe. And Krishna had the same idea. Because next Manu, after the Vaivasvata Manu, comes Bali Maharaj's turn to be Indra.
It's not good to stop the influence of Kali Yuga on the meter.
What?
To stop the influence of Kali Yuga.
How to do it? How to stop the influence of Kali Yuga?
It's possible.
Well, since we don't see any Maharaj Parikshits in the audience, we can understand that the method is to spread the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. The more and more people chant the holy names of the Lord, the more and more the influence of the age of Kali will diminish. And then, in such an atmosphere, some very great pious king can come and actually establish the proper social organization. But at this point, he would have to descend from the heavenly planets, because on this planet there is no such person.
Sometimes people ask if somebody died, bad karma, sinful activity, then they say that it's our philosophy that they can have a next life animal, right? So they ask, how is it that there's more and more people?
Most people die in the mode of passion. And all of those who come up, the animals who are in animal life, they can also elevate to the mode of passion, to the human form. So you have all these animals coming up, increasing into the human form. And you have most people dying in the mode of passion, staying. And some are going down.
So it's like cycle. People who die in passion, they become animals.
No, passion, you stay as human beings. Ignorance goes in. But from the animal species, one can come back up. So therefore it's always increasing. Even though some are falling down. But you got normally those from the animal species coming up. And also those who used to be people, but became animals, they'll also come back up. So basically you'll have more and more people.
It's rarely people who die in more goodness, they become demigods.
Very rarely. They go up to the demigod side. They don't become demigods. You cannot become a demigod. That's already, all the positions are filled. But you become a resident of the planets of the demigods. You get a residency permit for some time. That's only because you serve the demigods. You become the servant of the demigods on their particular planets. Like a work permit. Yes?
Those people, they don't live as long as the demigods on this planet. So just
No, for some time.
When we speak about eating vegetarian food, then we reach people with the fish with that. And then they ask about killing plants and all these things. And so sometimes we explain them also that by killing an animal, we stop their evolution. But then if they know something...
We don't say that we stop their evolution. That's not our philosophy. What we say is that you have unnaturally canceled the duration of life of the animal. Therefore, he will have to take birth as an animal again. That's only one portion of it. The real sinful activity is that you've killed another, therefore you're going to suffer.
Yeah, this is very important, because sometimes they say, well, if you judge the karma, how long you will be animal or something like that, therefore stop something which is actually not right.
Because you have free will. Therefore you can, by your free will, interfere within the natural cycle of karma of another. And that's what gives you such bad karma.
And you can change others' karma.
You don't change the karma, you interfere with it temporarily. Therefore that animal has to take birth again as an animal to finish off its karma as of that particular animal. Because you interfered with it.
But you got
Exactly the same karma.
I read in teachings of Lord Shiva that Lord Shiva, as a Shankaracharya, he came to preach Mayavada philosophy so that the population will increase.
Population will increase. Because when they're all Buddhists, they didn't even engage in sex life. But one of the symptoms of Mayavadis is that they are very sexually active. You may have noticed this practically. Modern Mayavadis. People get together in Mayavadi associations, and then the Mayavadi boys look at the Mayavadi girls. Then they go after the club of Mayavadis, they go home and have Mayavadi sex life. You notice it's a rule.
Dios karma stop. Let's say that they will stop. And what the use of medicine stop.
You can say like that if you are very spiritually powerful. Because if your body's useless, then what happens is you fall in the mode of ignorance and give up serving Krishna. If you're spiritually powerful, then you can keep on serving Krishna despite the suffering condition. But for a normal person, he has to struggle to keep the body somehow or another in the right kind of condition so that he has the best possible circumstances to serve Krishna. And he'll receive that painful karma in another way. At least the body will be going. And then maybe something else will happen. Instead of being sick, he'll fall down the stairs, or whatever. But at least in that somewhat healthy condition, he can serve Krishna. Understand? Because if you let the body rot, then the mind rots too. We have to maintain the body as much as possible, as it's needed to become Krishna conscious.
In Satyuga, Varnashram Dharma also established.
No, it started. Satyuga Varnashram was already there, but nobody followed it because they were all Paramahamsa Brahmanas. But when Treta Yuga started, then kings were required. Then it started up, really.
We believe in palaces also.
Huh?
Satyuga. Meditating.
Yes, they're all meditating.
So they did not have palaces, towns.
Palaces. Satyuga, no, it was not a time for economic development. That all began in Treta Yuga, really. Mainly in Satyuga, everybody was just engaged in spiritual affairs. Although maybe there was someone living in a palace or a king or whatever, but his idea was to get out of it as fast as possible. Find the story of Maharaj Uttanapada. This is very early. He was living in the Satyuga too. And he had his palace. But they were all very much aware of their spiritual responsibilities.
Paramahamsa was just chanting some very highest elevated institutions. How can we understand that they are on the highest level if they do not reach with this question of compassion and other beginnings?
Because the first thing is save yourself first. That's a Vedic rule. Save yourself first. Then you worry about everybody else. But there was nobody else to worry about. They were all engaged in this. So why worry? If there's no human beings to worry about, then why worry? See, this is the Kali Yuga man speaking. He thinks there must be something to worry about. But in the Satya Yuga, there's nothing to worry about. So that doesn't mean there's something wrong.
Is there nowadays such people?
Like in Satya Yuga?
Not on this level, but for example, we may hear about this
Paramahamsa?
Babajis or
No. Nowadays, everybody has to be engaged in this Krishna conscious preaching classes. Maybe one or two are good at what they do. Babaji, maybe. I don't know. I've not had experience. But right now, I don't think there's anybody left like that.
Babaji considered to be higher elevated than us?
No. Then who?
Than us?
Us?
Yes.
We're not very elevated.
I mean, some who is performing.
Bhajananandi as compared to a Goslinandi. Goslinandi are those who are preaching. Bhajananandi are those... No, not Mohammedan. No, not at all.
If we once say the name of Krishna, that we immediately become free from all attachments, but I didn't notice that.
No, it's like this. You have to chant the holy name of the Lord offenselessly. Have you noticed your chanting was offensive? When you chant the holy name of the Lord offenselessly, then those attachments will cease. But what it means is you get liberation. But you can always contaminate yourself again if you want. Because that's not the real liberation. That's not the final. The final liberation is when you end up in Krishna's abode. Otherwise, until then, we call this temporary liberation. Even the Mayavadis, if they go to Brahman, they fall down again. Because that's not real liberation. Real liberation means when you're engaged in Krishna's personal service in the spiritual world. So, you may notice momentary liberation, or for lasting for some time, but then you may notice that your desire is still there, or engaging in the material world. Therefore, again, one takes up the lower taste because of his desire. But if one always chants offenselessly, then he's free from that.
How they should behave in relation to women in which they are relationship. How to know in which woman they are situated. This is required that we come to the monogamous in order to prevent.
Definitely it's required that you come to the mode of goodness. Without coming to the mode of goodness, one cannot actually make progressive spiritual advancement. And as far as knowing what mode of nature we're in, well, that's not very important. Because we know what mode of nature we've got to get to. I mean, it would take some time to figure out how much we're in the mode of passion or how much we're in the mode of goodness. So that's not very valuable, because at the end, the conclusion would be the same. Well, we have to get to the mode of goodness. Therefore, we don't bother much with this, trying to figure out where we're at. And besides, then everybody would walk around and go, oh, you're in the mode of ignorance. Anyway, so it's just better that we get to the mode of goodness that way. And that's what counts. It's not so important that we have too much concern where we're at now. At least we can understand one thing. We're not very advanced. That we can understand. We can understand we have to elevate. That we can understand. We've got to get to the mode of goodness. That we can understand. That much is honest.
What kind of addiction that people who say Hare Krishna, escape hellish planet or
By chanting Hare Krishna? Yes, you escape the hellish planets. Yamaraj does not pick up persons who have chanted the holy name of the Lord.
people outside and think of them, they just say Hare Krishna.
If they just say Hare Krishna, they've started their spiritual progress. And they'll get another chance.
But they're going to anyone if they eat meat.
Not necessarily. And if they did go, they wouldn't be lost. They would come back. Sometimes when you go into the animal species, it's like spinning out of control. You're just lost. But if one is punished, for instance, for a lifetime or two for his sinful activities, but he'll come back again. He's not lost. He's never lost. When he's chanted Hare Krishna, he's never lost. We even find Bharat Maharaj, who had performed great austerities in the yogic practice, but was thinking of a deer at the time of death. You'll find that in the 5th canto. So, he fell back to the animal species, but he came back because of his divine consciousness. Punishment was there, but coming back. So one is never lost. Maybe one stays in animal life for some time. Who knows how long? But one will come back again and get another chance. Surrender. Therefore, it's so important to get people to say Hare Krishna. Avoid them. Don't get entangled with such persons. There are plenty of people out there. There's no need to get entangled and have to prove to this person that, you know, he's got to surrender now. Let's go somewhere else.
And we find that some area or some cities are more, people are more in goodness, or in other cities are more patient, and making this much more easy because those cities really collective karma or
Yes. The mode of nature is that way in that area, and they also, everybody by association has helped it in that way. They take birth there because of their quality.
Usually they're pious.
Pious? Somewhat. Better. It's relative. No one in the cities in the mode of goodness. There's just less ignorance.
In this area here, we have many people who are accustomed from very, very early age to drink wine and eat meat and these things. It's just normal cannot understand that stuff. So now I don't know, how shall we preach to these people? What's the most important point we should present them?
You're not the body. Things like this. Then gradually you can explain to them that killing animals is not good because it's bad for making karma. And if you make bad karma, you suffer. Then one day you might mention to them that the animals also suffer. Like this.
Here news are spread very, very fast and very far from us. And they recognize us because we're new here and they inquire us about our principles and this and that. So what should we say if they ask about these things?
You tell them, we don't eat meat. We don't kill animals. We're peaceful. Animals are also spirit souls. You're also spirit soul. Like this we can talk to them. We don't have to tell them, now you have to give up too. We just tell them what we do. Then it makes them think a little. Then maybe one day they may also question. But don't hold your breath, wait.
And they used to ask also if they would join or if they would be interested for our religion. Should they reject all these things or something, or how is it?
Which things?
For example, they're mostly interested in philosophies.
Well, you should tell them that they could chant Hare Krishna at home and read the books. And then gradually they may develop some higher taste. We don't demand that everybody just give up immediately. We say, just try something and then gradually see what happens. Purifying process. No force. That you have to be very careful. Never try to force local people, either by philosophy or anything, because then they'll start flipping out. You just present and say, yes, you can at home read. You don't have to change anything. Just add Krishna. Prabhupada always used to say like that. You don't have to change anything. Just add Krishna. Why do you laugh?
Up to the moment they give up all these 4 kinds of simple activities and take chanting 16 hours, they cannot be considered to be members of our society or any. I mean,
it depends. They can be friends of Krishna. Friend of Krishna, maybe he doesn't follow everything.
Actually, I'm trying.
But if he wants to become a full-time devotee, initiated and all that, then he's got to follow everything.
I'm trying to introduce Varnashram and Dharma.
Yes, that's like Varnashram Dharma. Varnashram Dharma is like that. Varnashram Dharma is that a person may not be so spiritually advanced, so he may perform his occupational duty and be pious and understand that he should offer the fruits of his activities to the Supreme or something. That's more than Varnashram Dharma. That's Karma Yoga. And they can become like friends of Krishna. Yeah. And then gradually, when they ask why you don't eat meat, you can tell them. And when they offer you a glass of wine, you can tell them, no, we don't drink that stuff. Then they ask why, you can tell them. But if you never push them, then they'll appreciate that. They'll like that. And they'll surrender quicker that way. And if somebody thinks that here I am, big preacher, you surrender now! It says in Bhagavad Gita, you surrender. No meat. You're a demon. Don't do that. That doesn't work.
So, can I go?
Yeah.
Some may ask, for example, we can see there is not many chances for some of these people that they give up all some of these activities, especially things.
You don't worry about them giving up anything. Your concern is to get them to accept something, not giving up. You've got to get them to accept serving Krishna, eating prasadam, or chanting Hare Krishna. Then automatically they'll give up. You should not worry about them giving up. That's negative.
They used to ask, what's my chance if I simply cannot, for example, if we somehow or other touch this subject.
So you say, look, first of all, nobody cannot. Second of all, you just take, Krishna consciousness is so powerful, you just take the higher. Then, gradually in due course, the needful will occur. You think you cannot because you think this is the only pleasure. If I gave you something much better, would you keep saying, no, I cannot give up? If I have my hand full of rocks, and I say, here, I got a diamond, but you can't take it, your hand's full of rocks. Immediately you throw those rocks away. Isn't it? So they think, I can't give up these rocks, these are very nice. Round rock. Square rock. Triangle rock. Blue rock. These are good you tell him, these are just rocks, throw them away. What do you mean these are just rocks? Don't you understand? These are very good rocks. You cannot artificially like this. All right. Oh, yes.
What can you say? Sometimes some Christians say that in the Bible is written that the Chinese meat, that the Jews were also eat fish.
Well, we've heard this before, but actually that's not said like that. If you get to more bona fide editions, you don't find these things. Sometimes they just take a book and then just put it in, because it's not there. So they figure it has to be in there, so they just put it in.
But if they don't believe in that this book is not authentic.
Anyway, then you should not bother too much. You just tell them logically. That they should not, you just explain to them logically why it's not meant for man, from the health point of view, or other points of view. And if they don't want to accept it, don't bother. There's nothing worse than a shastra which has been changed. Because then everybody's bewildered, they don't know what's going on. Nothing worse than that. Very dangerous. Therefore, we reject completely all these changed books. Whenever a book is changed, everything is bad. Last question. Other religious systems came into existence because at their particular time and place and circumstance, the Vedic principles were so gone that people needed some way to regulate themselves to get out of the animal platform. It's like Muhammad had to tell his followers, don't have sex with your mother. Because things were so far gone, he had to say like this. Don't have sex with your mother. Everybody knows don't have sex. But his followers didn't know it. Therefore he had to tell them. So you can understand, when people are so degraded, then Krishna sometimes establishes a particular religious system which is good for them. Not the eternal religious system, but temporary ones which are good for them because they're in bad shape. That was the last question.
Just what does it mean that Vedic principles were gone?
It means that the people were so degraded they didn't have the slightest connection to the Vedic principles. They didn't even know it to give it up. It was just gone. Okay? Well, Prabhupada, good for sure. No. Yes. Harikesa.